so did you checked out that video, Jillian?
It was great. And I can play it on, and I can share it when you want me to.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm also,
I know everybody kind of gets to it.
I'm also recording this video so I can share it with the guides who are unable to be here.
Okay, great. So no pressure. Anyway, so I know like this sort of layering clothing base is really basic to most of us, but I actually teach part-time at the Waldo County Technical Center, and I teach high school students, and we came up with this really wonderful way of sort of driving home that layering piece, so that if you actually are working with groups, you're teaching people, and they're like, you're talking about layering and your base layer, and and your insulating layer, and they're like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. But even though I've been doing this for like 20 years, well, more than that, like 30 years, when I saw this, I was really amazed by it. So I said to Jillian, would you be interested in this? I know it's a topic that people know a lot about, but I just think it's really cool. And Nicole and I are working. I know Nicole Caruso who's the teacher of the outdoor leadership program over there, who I work with. She and I are going to putting together a series of educational videos for students. So this was kind of, I said, well, I'll just go through the first draft and do this. And so we had a lot of fun putting this together. So we'll go through that, and then just some basic things about hypothermia, which I'm sure for some of you who've all had your wilderness first aid or responder is not rocket science. Frostbite, Raynaud's, trench foot, kind of mentioned those three other big pieces. I have my little notes here so I don't forget what I'm talking about. Nutrition, how our nutritional needs for the winter. And then I have like my little show and tell over here, which is all the extra things that I tend to carry in my pack in the winter. I don't do a lot of overnight. I don't winter camp anymore. I stay in cabins. I've kind of gotten to that point in my life where I want to stay in a place that has at least a wood stove. It doesn't have to be fancy, but I want to stay somewhat warm. So that's kind of what we came up with. And feel free to ask questions, feel free to, not even ask questions, but if you have other things to add, because you all are experienced folks that I know that I don't know everything by any means, and that if you all have stuff to add, that'd be great. So it could turn into a discussion versus me just sitting here going, and talking at you about things that you may have some information about. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. So Jillian, go ahead and put this video up.
Great.
You'll see that the COVID-15 Bob got to me over the past few months. When I looked at this video, oh my God.
It was I had it up. Hi, Gewalt. How do I do this? Okay.
Is that it? It's going to MailChimp.
You've heard us all talk about
are you seeing it?
Right?
Yeah.
Can you hear it?
Not very well.
Material here. I'm going to show you how it's wet. So let's think about that. When folks first start going outside, what do they typically wear? Jeans, cotton long underwear. This is what our grandparents taught us. This is what our parents taught us. It hasn't been until recent years that we've really discovered that this is probably the least efficient way to stay warm and can actually cause hypothermia. So cotton, I'm going to show you what happens when I put this in the water. And think about this. It's pretty amazing. First, we'll put in the jeans. Look at it, it immediately absorbs all that water, and it pretty much sinks right to the bottom. Okay, next, I'm going to put in the cotton long underwear. It just sucks up that water and it goes right to the bottom. So here we go. I'm going to pull this out, and it's dripping, all that dripping water. I put that on my skin, and then my layer over it on my skin. And I have a recipe for hypothermia, for getting frostbite from being very cold. This doesn't go anywhere. It stays there and it draws the heat out of me through conduction. Okay, so I'm going to wring this out. I'm going to hang it up, and I'm going to show you the really cool thing. Got my little clothesline, so we can be efficient here. I'll have puddles of water underneath me when this is all done. All right, so next let's take a look at the fibers that I have here. I have our base layer, which is your long underwear, and it can come in different fibers. It can be silk, it can be polyethylene, I was going to say. It can be polypropylene, synthetic or natural fibers. It can also come in wool. So this is what we put on first, and the purpose of this is to wick that moisture away from us. So I'm going to put this in the water. Just think for 1 second, what do you think is going to happen to this? Wonder if it'll sink to the bottom. Let's find out. Now check this out. It's not doing anything. Look at me poking it. It beads the water right off. It's like plastic. It pulls the water away from you. It's not sinking to the bottom. It's just floating, and that water is wicking away. That's what wicking is. It's pulling it away because it's synthetic. Silk and wool will do this as well. Those are the only natural fibers that will do this. So I take this out, I put it on my skin. It's going to wick that moisture away from me and go into the very next layer. Okay, my skin's not drenched here. Let's stick this over here for right now. And the next layer is your mid layer, and that's an insulating layer. Excuse me, it keeps you warm. I have a couple different, this is a thinner one and this is a thicker one. So it comes in a bunch of different thicknesses and yeah, just thicknesses. So what's going to happen? I have this under there, that water beads off of it like you just saw. This pulls that water into it, okay? And it pulls that water away from your body. And check this out. Here comes the thin one. Same thing, look at that. It's got little beads of water. It's just holding it there. It's not sinking. It's holding that water. I can take it. If I fall through the ice or I get really wet, I can take my shirt off, wring it out and put it back on me. And then look at this. If I put it back in there, it's not gonna sink to the bottom. It's still gonna retain that ability to pull that moisture away from you. Next one, here's a little bit thicker one, a little thicker. I'm splashing lots of water on here. Try to sink it. It's not gonna sink. Again, that water is beating to the top, okay? So this is your mid layer, and this is what's gonna insulate you. That moisture that's being wicked away is being stored in here, and it's gonna keep you warm. Right. I'll hang these up in just a moment too. And the last layer is your outer layer, Gore-Tex or some sort of waterproof fiber. And put that in here, and this really beads it off. So what this does is it insulates you from the outer elements. It retains your heat and it helps keep you warm. Okay, and that's the same thing. It's not going to sink. Now, Gore-Tex is a breathable fiber. There's also, regular rain jackets that do not breathe. If you can afford, or if you can find a reasonable breathable outer layer, that's better because that allows the moisture to come out. Sometimes if you have like a plastic or a rubber raincoat, that really holds it in, you end up getting wet. It'll still keep you warm, it'll just be wet, okay? One of the natural fiber I didn't talk about is wool. And this is a boiled wool. I have some boiled wool mittens over here that I like to use. And this is a natural fiber that will also keep you incredibly warm. The thing about wool though, is that it does retain the water and it retains its warmth with water, but it becomes very heavy. But some people prefer natural fibers. They don't want to use the plastics. So you have silk and wool are really your two number one materials. And you can get it in a variety of thicknesses and a variety of weaves. So let's put this in there. It's not going to sink, but it is definitely holding more water. But it doesn't matter because it's not sinking. It's holding that moisture. It's holding that warmth, even though it's wet. Again, you can take it off. You can wring it out. Wool socks, think about that. Put them back on and they will keep you warm. My wool mittens, these are my wool mittens. I have a lot of synthetic mittens, and these are by far the warmest that I have. So that's the basics of layering. Let me hang these up behind me. Just get them out of the way. They should dry. About 2 seconds. Isn't this classroom great? All these boats. Okay, my mittens. Now the last thing I have here on the table to show you is down. Down is a natural fiber. And by far, in terms of weight to warmth ratio, it is the best one you can use. However, when it gets wet, it is useless. It turns into a big ball of muck, which I can show you here. Now this has a waterproof layer over it a little bit. So it's going to protect it a little bit. It's going to take it a little while to get drenched. It's not really going to sink. But if I push this down, if I'm in a rain situation where I'm getting wet, this is going to turn into a big ball. And it's really hard. See how those fibers are all kind of stuck together? Okay. They don't retain the moisture at all. They just turn into a ball. Okay. So does that mean this is useless in the backcountry? Absolutely not. It means that when you use down, you want to make sure you have a good outer layer to keep you dry. If I know I'm going into an environment where it's really wet, I'm not going to bring my down jacket. I'm not going to bring my down sleeping bag. I'll bring my synthetics. But if I'm going into an environment where I know it's not going to rain or it's not going to be heavy wet snow, I'll bring my down. I'll bring my down jacket. Sometimes I bring it just to wear on camp because it really keeps you warm. Remember, the key to that is having that outer layer. Okay, let me show you quickly now some of those layers sort of from here to the clothing. Okay, we'll go to the next piece. Under. So here's a synthetic. This is silk. This is a silk long underwear shirt, my North Star Adventure shirts. And I have gotten them very wet and they keep me very warm. This is a polypropylene, so this is that thin layer that you saw beating off the water. The next layer, this would be the mid layer, and there's several different things. I have this one, which I really like. It's got a big, warm turtleneck, keeps me warm. I run cold. It's got pockets. And you really want to look for these little thumb holes because it helps keep your hands and your thumbs much warmer. Pretty cool, huh? You can also get some that zip and have a hood. Some people prefer the hood. Some people prefer the zipper because they can unzip it if they get hot. Again, it depends on you, your personal choice. Do you get hot, cold, what your environment is going to be, okay? The key is you don't want to sweat. They always say in a winter environment, start a little cold because you want to sweat. Because if you sweat and then that gets cool, it can make you get colder and then you have no way to get warm. Here's my down. This is Big Puffy. This is a very old jacket. I've had this a really long time, as you can tell. It's what I was saying. It's really warm, but it can't get wet. This is a thinner layer. This is the synthetic fiber fill. There's a lot of different varieties of the synthetic jackets, the down sweaters. These will keep you warm, not as quite as warm as a down jacket, but again, some of these they're a little bit better at retaining, wicking the moisture away than this is because they're a synthetic fiber. So this, you know, coupled with your base layer and your mid layer, and then you might have this over top of it, is perfect. Okay, and then my last thing here is the Gore-Tex jacket. Okay? You just, you know, you can spend a fortune or not. Back when I started this stuff was really expensive, but now you can find things in Goodwill. And you don't have to buy Arc'teryx. You don't have to buy the really high-end expensive brands. You can find things out there that are affordable for you. But this is key to have in your backpack to keep you the wind off of you and just to keep that moisture and that warmth inside. So that's what I've got. It's pretty cool. If you have any questions, if you have anything, please contact North Star Adventures. My number is 692-3128, or excuse me, 692-3138, and northstaradventures.me. Thank you.
Well, I thought that was interesting, seeing all of the different materials. And I mean,
I just think it's,
I know all these things, but to see the example of them.
That's how I felt when I first saw those experiments. I was like, that was really cool. So Alicia, you said something, what about bamboo? That's a cool, you know, I don't have a lot of experience using bamboo. Has anybody else used it? No,
I'm
I'll
really
check it out.
intrigued by the tencel, like the plant-based materials. I want to know more about them for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And I don't know that much because I've only, you know, used silk or wool, but I'll have to make sure I learn more about that as well, because you're right, I hadn't even really thought too much about the plant-based materials. So that's, and like I said, I know for you that all that's pretty elementary, pretty straightforward, but I thought it might just be kind of a good way if you're teaching anybody. It really drives home looking at that beating off kind of stuff. All right, so anybody else, anything else they want to add? Yeah, their favorite thing.
Thank you so much for taking something we hear commonly and say commonly and showing us. That was really, really impactful.
Thank you.
So
you're welcome.
Maybe you'll share that video with us, because I would love to give that example to other people.
Well, I will. If I can, it's one of the reasons Jillian was sharing it tonight is because I have really, everything about what I have here is terrible connection. And so I can't show videos to people, they don't work. So I will send it to you, or I'll have Jillian send it to you, because you have it as a Google Doc, which for sure, I can absolutely make sure you get that. And feel free to, and it's like, you know how it is in this industry, everything is, there's not a lot of proprietary stuff. We like to share things with each other, right? So anything I got that I share with you is yours to use.
That's so nice of you to say.
And that's how I feel than anything. You know, we're all in this together. There's plenty of work for everybody, and we all need to just get folks outside. So
the other evening, Kelly, who's on the call, did a talk on some of the similar stuff. And she said something which I actually wrote down and love, relating to how you said, don't get sweaty. She said, I think you said, go bold, start cold. And I've been thinking about that when I start off on a winter hike or walk.
Yeah, it's true. If you start out hot, forget it. You're sunk. In 2 minutes, you're sweating, and yeah, all that stuff. Okay, so we can move on a little bit. The other things I have, if there's anything of these topics that we talked about that you want to go over first. So, you know, just the hypothermia basics, frostbite, Raynaud's, trench foot, the cold stuff, nutrition, or the not just first aid, but what I carry in my emergency pack. Is there one of those that you would prefer? I like that comment, Alicia. Any preferences of what you want to talk about first? Or should I just dive in?
Yeah, I say dive in. I don't know much about trench foot, so I'm sure you don't skip that one.
I won't skip that one, actually, because that's what I think. I'll start with those and then I'll move on to hypothermia. So trench foot, actually, one of the reasons I bring up whenever I teach, even though it's not officially in the wilderness first aid curriculum, I always teach it as sort of the aside, because we live in Maine and because we live in a place that it's wet, right? We're hiking in water, winter, spring, summer, that we have water, except for maybe this year, perhaps. But so trench foot, as some of you may know, is that it came out of the First World War, right? From people walking in the trenches and their feet were constantly wet. So it's about cold, or not even cold, but wet feet. And trench foot could actually develop in 6 hours or less. So it can become a problem really, really quickly. And so what happens, you know, when your fingers get in your hand or your feet get really waterlogged and you get like those, I used to call them old lady wrinkles, but I don't do that anymore. But you get waterlogged and they get all, you know, wrinkly. Well, what happens, your feet are wet and you're walking and you've got socks on and you're not stopping. And that skin just fluffs off. It just comes right off. It kind of tears right off. And it gets really infected. It can be very dangerous. It can be almost more dangerous than frostbite. And there's been a lot of amputations with trench foot, partially because it happens really quickly and people don't think about it. They just think, oh, my feet are wet. Yeah, they're getting a little wrinkly, but they will be fine. But once that skin starts to peel off, you're exposing all those nerve endings and it's really, really painful and it can cause permanent nerve damage. So the biggest thing for that is just prevention, right? Taking those socks off, drying those feet. You know, when I send folks their equipment list, I always have like at least 4 pair of socks or 5 pair of socks. I don't skimp on socks because I want people to have warm, dry feet, right? And so if they're hiking and people are complaining, even if they're not complaining, you've been hiking in water, take people's boots out, you know, your brakes, take their feet out of their boots, dry them off, take off the socks. If they're wet, wring them out, dry them off, put on a fresh pair. I tell people if your boots get wet, and your feet get wet and you have wet socks, that's your recipe for disaster. So I also carry bagel bags or some sort of plastic bag that if their boots are really wet, they can put dry socks on and slide them into their boots. And then they're going to prevent those feet from getting wet and rubbing against that wet leather. Because that's what trench foot really is. It's really quite disgusting. So if someone, it does get it, they're pretty much want to, yeah, you'll have to tell me about that one, Catherine. If they get it between their toes a lot too. And if someone does get, you want to wrap a dry sterile dressing and keep them opened. You want to keep them aired out. You want to keep everything aired. You don't want it to be closed and tight because that's just that bacteria is going to grow in there. So if they have a really bad case, they're not walking out. You know, you're going to have to carry them out, or hopefully it's not too far in and you could help carry them out, you know, and it's not like a 20-mile venture back into the woods where they'd actually have to be hauled out somehow. But again, prevention, stopping, making sure people's feet are dry, making sure that they change your socks or you have plastic bags, because it can be really, really, really dangerous. So who said something about their friend was taken off the AT because of trench foot? I saw a little note come up and someone said, my friend was on trench.
It wasn't a friend of mine.
That was you.
I was on a hike and a guy came in to, and he earned his keep by giving a whole entire talk about trench foot and showing us what happens when he had been on the AT and it had been raining for about, I think, 7 days at the time, and he was really struggling to stay dry. But anyway, I thought it was sort of like an interesting thing that you get to, you know, work for your dinner by teaching a bunch of women at the time. It was a whole group of women about trench foot and showing them your feet. So.
That's all right. I love that. I'm glad you have any amputations. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I tried to message the whole group, but then I just sent it to Alicia. Ugh, glad I don't use Zoom regularly.
Yeah, I don't do that stuff either.
But yeah, when I hike, we always it was like an unspoken thing that we always did is we knew we were gonna take a long break for lunch, so we would take off our shoes, socks, wring them out, set them in the sun to dry, so that they were dry when we put them back on. Yeah, because I got wet feet in Vermont because it rained every day. I was just reflecting on my through hike experience, and of the 10 days that I was in Vermont, it rained on 8 of them.
Oh my gosh.
So I was definitely this close to trench foot. Okay.
Yeah, I bet you were. Holy cow. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time in a sea kayak and my feet are always wet. And even there, if I'm with a group and I'm getting in and out of my boat and we're walking around islands, I can get drenched from being in neoprene booties. So I take them out. I have a couple pairs, I might put on a pair of Keens or something that breathes to keep all that water out of there and my feet dry. It happens really quickly.
Can you talk a little bit about the Raynaud's? Because I've had a couple people recently ask me or tell me that they're nervous about going on adventures because that their toes or their feet and their fingers and hands get really cold.
Yeah, Raynaud's is challenging. It's more prevalent, in women, and it's just essentially a circulation problem. And their hands and feet get cold really quickly. It can be, the middle of summer and their hands are getting cold, and they'll start to turn a little bit white. Sometimes they get tingly. Does anybody here have it? I know you have it. You have it. So you could probably shed some light on it for sure. And what I tell people, I always ask people if they have any Raynaud's because I know so many people that do, and I discovered it. From being with groups and all of a sudden people are having cold hands all the time. And now it's kind of become part of my regular thing when I'm taking a group out, for extended period, do you have Raynaud's? Or if someone's hands start getting cold, I ask immediately, do you have Raynaud's? And how do you manage it? Doing this, shaking their hands down like this, people I know will stop and do that just to get that blood circulating. But the key is trying to keep them as warm as possible. There's not much you can do. You three can tell us what you do. Shaking your hands, those little hand warmers will be helpful. Sometimes holding a warm cup of tea or a thermos to help keep your hands warm. But with any of the cold related injuries, you want to keep the core, start with warming the core, right? If the core is warm, then it's going to heat, the rest of the body is going to stay warm. But Raynaud's is a little different because it is a circulatory problem. And so people with Raynaud's just have to they manage it themselves. Skin to skin contact, just like you would do any other cold injuries, right? Skin to skin contact, armpits. If their feet get cold, they can put them on your belly. Just making sure that if they're cold, they're stopping and warming them up because they can get frostbite and all those other things much quicker. Mm-hmm. So those of you who have Raynaud's, chime in. What you got?
I'll chime in. I've had Raynaud's my whole life, and my mother did too, and one of my children does. One thing the only thing that's worked for me is electric socks and electric mittens. And they do work. My feet get cold, but they get like human cold instead of debilitating.
Right. Yeah, that's a good thing. Absolutely.
So the chemical hand warmers don't work for you, Mom?
Borderline.
Okay. That was one thing I recommended to one of these women who told me her concern, but I wasn't sure how effective it would be.
They're better than nothing, but it's only where the hand warmers are at.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's different with Raynaud's because it's everything. It's your whole hand or feet. Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Livia?
Oh no, I was just saying I pretty much always have hand warmers like in pockets or in gloves that I might like change into. So like maybe like a base layer glove and then like put it in, like my pockets. That's where a hand warmer is. Then if it gets cold, at least I'm not like exposing my really terrible Raynaud's hands.
Right. Yeah, that's a good.
And I put my hands into something warm. And otherwise, like I think I definitely recommend like compression socks.
Compression socks.
Something that just kind of helps the cause and also be mindful of shoes too tight. Like I feel like it's a really easy thing. I experience it when I hike. I experience it in the winter too. And it's just like, all right, we'll just make sure to kind of loosen up because you expand when you work. I mean, you kind of like, we're not swelling as much as we are in the summer or in the winter as we are in the summer. It's still definitely like a thing when you're when you're using your body. So yeah, it's a struggle. But yeah, I recently discovered electric socks, and that is a game changer. So
that's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
So, but as a guide, we're, you know, as guys, when you're with people, you're not going to be taking electric socks with you. So what we can do is just like you said, Olivia, have the hand warmers. And so that's sort of my way of managing it is if someone's hands are cold, we stop, we shake them out, we give them hand warmers. If I need to do skin to skin contact, I'll do everything I would for treating like frostbite or other cold related injuries to try to keep them warm. And I always carry extra gloves. And even in the middle of the summer, I'll have big gloves in my backpack, just in case I have someone who gets really cold, you know, get their hands.
I'll just add one thing.
Yeah, please.
Gloves absolutely do not work.
I mean, not gloves, mittens. I meant mittens,
right,
not gloves. Yeah.
Right.
I agree. I don't like gloves. I'm a mitten gal. Yeah. Thank you for yeah.
And Kelly just put a note in the comments saying that snowshoe bindings can also make boots tighter and feet colder. So sure, watch the tightness of your snowshoe bindings.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. All that there's no circulation for the air for your feet. Yeah.
Can you talk about observing frostbite?
Yep. So frostbite, and I do actually have a couple pictures. Frostbite is interesting. Let's see if I can hold these. This is just the pictures from this book. If I can find them really quickly, I have them. But anyway, so frostbite, let's just talk about it really quickly. I used to talk about it being first degree, second degree, third degree. And now the language has changed to be superficial, partial, and full thickness, just like burns, okay? So first degree or superficial is just it affects the outer layer. And has anybody had hands that have gotten really cold and then when they start to warm up, they're painful?
Yes.
Yes. And that can happen with just first degree frostbite. You're just damaging that outer layer of skin, that epidermal layer. And it's not, the tissue hasn't frozen yet. Nothing is frozen at this point yet. It's just very, very cold. It's on its way to being frozen. And it gets kind of white and waxy. But even then it can be really painful. And the key to treating, obviously like all of this, prevention is the key. You warm the core first. Get folks moving, shake out their hands, shake out their body, give them some carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are going to give you that quick burn that's going to create heat in your body quickly through metabolism. Warm gloves, or I'm sorry, I always say gloves, but I mean mittens because I don't wear gloves, clearly. Dry, warm mittens, again, skin to skin contact, okay? Back when I was growing up, they used to tell you to put your cold feet in cold water. I never understood that. We'd come back from ice skating, absolutely frozen, and my mom would say, put it in the cold water, and we did. I'm not sure what that theory was behind that, but it was that theory. And sometimes I'll have just, again, I always have warm thermoses of warm tea with me, and so I'm always having people hold something warm. But again, that's pretty easy, and to manage first degree. Second degree frostbite, then it starts going down into the dermis, into the next layer of skin. And so your muscles are 75% water. You have a lot of fluid in your water, in your body, and those crystals start to freeze. So you have partial freezing, okay, of the fluid. And when fluid expands, it creates what is the blebs. And those are those big, ugly, let's see if you can see these pictures. I only have 3. There you go, if you can see those pictures. This is the blebs right here. Okay, these big, ugly blebs. This is first degree, that's second degree. Those blebs may not appear right away, and they can appear quickly, or they may take several hours to appear. But you have partial freezing of those crystals of the fluid in the cells. And so we don't field rewarm those. What we want to do is we want to keep them from getting any colder. So we're going to wrap them in a sterile dressing. If it's the hands, we're going to separate the toes like we would Raynaud's. We're going to warm the body. Hot drinks. You can use hot warm bottles, for people to hold. You know how when you wrap people like on a hypo wrap, and you might put some like a water, not a water bottle, but an Nalgene full of warm water for them to hold to warm their core. So you want to warm their core. Like again, you can do skin to skin contact. Keep them warm the body, and get them out, okay? Because that can progress to third degree frostbite for that full thickness where it's like when you're pounding on it, sounds like wood where everything is frozen solid. It's really painful, and sometimes you can't tell the difference between between second and third degree. Because third degree also has blebs, but it gets really black and purpley. Like here's the third degree down here at the bottom right here. It's like really black, those black toes. People are going to get evacuated at that point. And again, like I said, it's not field rewarming, it's keeping it from freezing any further and getting any more damaged. Sterile dressing, loose socks, prevention again is the biggest thing. So keep warm. And people are starting to get cold. If they're starting to put on the continuum of hypothermia and they're starting to get cold, the first thing you do is get a movement, right? Because how do we gain heat in our body? We move. We start moving to create heat. Carbohydrates create heat through metabolism. So we're going to give them, if they can eat, we're going to give them high sugar content food, hot drinks if they can swallow to warm that core, to get that core warming. And then out they go. They need morphine. These people are going to need morphine. We don't want to pop those blisters. If there's blisters, we want to make sure that they don't pop because they're really, really receptive to infection. And so we need to be really careful with folks who have any kind of blebs on their feet. And again, like someone said earlier about tight shoes, one of my favorite stories that I tell all the time when I teach this, when I teach a wilderness first aid class, is that my son and I used to ice climb together and we had the exact same boots. And so he left one day and he took my boots by mistake, and they're smaller. And he didn't realize that they're in Vermont and they're hiking through snow waist deep to get to this place. And he was always tall and thin and didn't take care of himself. And his feet froze, and his friend had to actually backpack him out. But they were 17 years old or something, instead of stopping at the hospital in Vermont, they drove all the way back to Maine, and his feet started to thaw out and they were incredibly painful. And luckily he did not have to have his feet amputated, his toes amputated. And but his boots were too tight. He had my boots on, they were too tight. He didn't have the right socks. He didn't eat. He had hardly any nutrition in him. And they hiked miles back in deep snow. And so all these things led up to his feet freezing. And I always take my solo hat off when I say this. And I really feel like the thing that saved his toes was hypericum. I use homeopathy and herbs and hypericum, and the homeopathic form is for nerve damage. So I just gave him all this hypericum for nerves. And when I brought him to this surgeon, and her job is to amputate toes, she was shocked. She was like, I don't know what you did, but his feet are fine. And so there really is a lot to be said for that prevention piece of being smart, making sure you have a lot of high dense calories in you, fat, protein, and carbohydrates so you have energy and burn all day long, and make sure you have the right size boots. If you're starting to get cold, stop. Don't continue on your climb or your hike or whatever. You turn around, you stop, and you come back and take care of it. All that preventative stuff. But once it happens, you got to get them out and get them to the hospital. Don't drive through 3 states till you do it, because it's excruciatingly painful. You think about it, all those nerves have been frozen and they are now coming back alive, and they've been deeply frozen and deeply damaged. So if you think just with a 1st degree or superficial frostbite, how painful that is, think about if it's frozen solid and it's coming back. So we have to be quite careful. What's that?
I have a question.
Sure.
Many of our adventures are, more front country.
Yeah.
I don't know, 3 to 5 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours might be the max of a winter hike. How likely, if people are dressed well, would the 2nd degree be?
Not so much, unless unless they are totally exposed skin. So say I decided to hike up Bigelow and it was really windy and really cold and I had exposed skin in the winter, I could easily get frostbite. But as long as you're prepared for the environments you're going into, the chances should be pretty slim, right? If you have the right clothing, you're protected from the elements, you're protected from wind, you have boots that fit, and you're eating enough, you're stopping, you're taking care of yourself. You might get cold, but the chances of it really progressing in a day are pretty slim unless you are very exposed. You fall through the ice or you have something like that, where it's an extreme situation.
But in a typical day where everything's going well and the boots fit well, you should
be fine.
Slim chance. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thanks.
Everything has to go wrong like it did that day when he hurt his feet. So that's frostbite. And hypothermia, the thing about hypothermia is that, again, like everything else, is preventable, right? So the first thing we do is we talk about how to prevent it in the first place. We have the right clothing, we layer, we talk about, starting out cold. And if you start to feel it till you warm up, right? Starting out your hike cold till you warm up. But as soon as you feel any cold, layering, adjusting those layers. And everybody does that differently. And everybody has a different threshold of when they're hot and when they're cold. But really, you don't know hypothermia is coming on. You need to pay attention to your participants. And so if someone's starting to get a little chilly, if they're starting to get a little confused, you know, they're maybe starting to get a little grouchy. Sometimes it even mimics, what's the word I want to say? I guess dehydration. Yeah, because really you are dehydrated. Where your brain is affected. So when your brain gets affected from hypothermia or anything, really, it starts to compensate, right? It starts to compensate from the outer layer in. So the first thing that's going to go are some of those fine motor skills. So they might not be able to zip up their jacket. They might not be able to button their jacket. They might get a little grouchy. Stop. Get them some food. Get them jumping around. Do the boot dance. Do whatever you need to do to get people moving. If they're wet, take those clothes off and put something warm on. Hot drinks. I'm a big proponent of hot drinks and feeding people sugar. It's the only time I give myself a license to eat lots of sugar. But if you miss it and they continue down that, they go down the continuum. Remember, hypothermia is a continuum from I'm slightly cold till I'm in what we call the metabolic icebox of doom, where someone is just appears to be dead. Okay. On a day hike, that shouldn't happen. On a day hike, I've had people kind of in the upper end of hypothermia. They've sort of not quite got the umbles, but they're a little bit confused. They're shivering. Okay. So anyway, after they start to get confused and they can't zip up their jacket, they'll start to shiver. Shivering is that body's reflex, right? Movement makes you warm. So the body that's what shivering is. It's creating muscle contractions to keep you warm. If at that point you still don't manage it and you continue down that continuum, we get what we call the umbles: stumble, mumble, fumble, tumble, crumble, and they appear drunk. They're kind of staggering all over the place. Once that happens, their shivering gets even more intense. They can fall to the ground and becomes very convulsive shivering. It looks like a convulsion, like someone's having an epileptic seizure. And then if it continues down that continuum, they have this, what we call the metabolic icebox of doom. Okay. Their heart you can't feel a pulse. Their body is conserving everything it's got, every bit of oxygen, and sending it to the brain. And you can barely feel a pulse. If you were to, that typically on your day wouldn't happen unless you really weren't paying attention. That is something that either would be a multi-day or you might come upon someone in that condition. And if you did, then that's when you would put them in the hypothermic wrap. And you would just monitor the ABCs, their airway, breathing, and circulation, and you would not do CPR or anything like that to those folks. But for what you're going to see, you're going to get them moving. You're going to give them food. Okay. So remember the 4 types of heat loss, right? One of them was conduction. I'm sitting on a cold ground. It's pulling the heat out of me, right? Just like that little thing. Wind, convection, the other type of heat loss. Radiation. My body's radiating that heat. So I put clothes on to keep that heat here. What am I forgetting? Radiation, conduction, convection, and oh, come on. Radiation, conduction.
Conduction's when you're in water?
Yeah.
It's actually both. And I've had this discussion with people. I consider conduction, being in water can be both conduction and convection. Okay. So I consider conduction when I'm touching something cold.
Evaporation's the last one.
Thank you. I knew it was coming. It was just stuck. It wasn't coming out. And I don't have notes for it in front of me because usually I don't need notes for hypothermia. Right. You sweat, right? You sweat. That's the other thing about sweating. You have all this fluid on you and then it starts to evaporate and then the cold air takes it away and makes you cold. But in terms of conduction and convection in water, you lose heat at least a minimum of 25 times faster in cold moving water than you do in the air. So, and there's an argument for both. It's convection because that moving water is pulling it away, like the air is pulling it away, but it's also conduction because you're in it and it's drawing the water out of you. So I've seen arguments for both of that for water. I usually say convection because I think of it as pulling it away from off of you, just like air. I did get online one time and I was searching all these different things. And I think I even checked out the Wilderness Medical Society and what their thought was. And there was still people on both sides of that, you know, conduction, convection for moving water. So that's what we want to prevent. So we want to get them off the cold ground. We want to get them off the cold rock. We want to get them out of the snow. Whatever that is, we want to make sure they have a wind layer on to protect them from convective air loss. We want to make sure that they have enough clothes on to capture their heat, right? And we want to make sure they're not sweating. And if they're sweating, they either take that off and put something that's not wet on, or they put something on that's going to wick that moisture away from them. But really, the thing I tell people about hypothermia is you don't need to know their body temperature, like, oh my God, at 92 degrees, this is going to happen, because nobody carries a rectal thermometer. Just know that if it's cold out, or not even if it's cold out, the temperature that most people get hypothermia is not in the middle of winter, because we're prepared for it. We get frostbite in the middle of winter, we get cold. We get hypothermia when it's 60 degrees outside, because we're like, oh, we're going to be fine, and we're not fine. That's when you think about it. If I sat outside in shorts and a t-shirt and it was 60 degrees outside, I can get hypothermia. That's that my body is radiating that heat and it's trying to create that equilibrium between the outside temperature and me. So it's drawing the heat out of me. And people just don't think about it in the summer. But paying attention to people. If they start to get a little grouchy, see if they just need some food and drink and water, because it could be that they're dehydrated. And if it's me, I'm probably dehydrated because I don't drink a lot.
And see,
if they start to shiver a little, it could be cold.
If you can't do your hip belt clip, that's another sign.
Right, right. I can't buckle. I'm trying to buckle my buckle and it won't happen. I'm trying to zip. It's not going to happen. That's what you're going to see. You're not going to see that convulsive shivering because you're doing day stuff.
Right.
You'll see that probably if you come upon somebody. I mean, I've done overnights with people who've gotten hypothermia and they've only barely gotten to that piece where they could just zip like this, and we had to take care of them. And it did take us a while to get them warmed back up, for sure. Luckily, we had a cabin and we were able to do that. Prevention, watching each other, okay, making sure your folks don't get cold. Have you folks all done a hypothermic wrap? Has anybody not done a hypothermia wrap?
I don't remember.
Watched a demo, right?
Yeah. Oh, they're really fun to do, and when I teach them in woofer or woofa, either one, we always have the perfect ingredients. We have the big giant tarp, and we have the insulating material, we have everything, but when you're in reality, you're not going to have that. You're going to have what they have in their pack. So I always tell people when they practice them to practice with what you have in your pack, and I'll show you what I have. But for those who have not seen one, here's just a basic picture of a hypothermic wrap, and think of it like the layering for the whole body. So you have someone who's very cold, they can't warm themselves up. We're going to try to get them into this. Oh, good. I love it. I was going to try to do a hyper wrap, but I'd love to see your hyper wrap video, Alicia. That sounds great. You want to wrap them up in this cocoon to try to keep their body warmth in. So you have your layer, your outer layer, which is, here's the one picture of that I have, the layer, this outer layer, which is the wind protection. Then you have the insulate pad or whatever kind of pad you have, which is going to protect from that convective heat loss from the ground. And then you have a sleeping bag or whatever, which is going to be that insulating and warm them. And it's going to keep them warm or hold that warmth in. And then you just wrap it up just like you would a burrito. And the one thing they do in this picture that I don't do is I usually put it at the diagonal this way, because then I can fold the corner up and the two sides in. And that way I can get to their feet and check their feet if I need to, if I want to check their pulses and their feet. This way, I find it a little bit harder to get in there and check. So you have that, some sort of wind protection layer, some sort of insulation from the ground, and then some sort of something to keep them warm. And it can be a tarp from a tent, if that's what they have. It can be anything that they have in their backpack that you throw in there. I usually take shoes off to make sure that their feet have circulation. You can wrap the feet right up, you can wrap the shoes right up in the burrito roll with them. If the socks are wet, I take them off and try to put warm socks on. I might even put their mittens over their feet. I put a little hat on their head. You can put hot water bottles. You don't want to warm their extremities, especially if they're not conscious, or because this is a really cool theory, I think, that your body, in a last ditch effort to get warm, your brain signals your brain dumps potassium into your system. So you have this big potassium dump to heat up the body. And so what that does is it messes up your metabolism. And so your body metabolism the pH is way off. So if you start doing CPR on people, the heart is really receptive to any slight change in pH. So if I start doing CPR, if I start warming that blood and that blood starts to circulate, I could actually cause a heart attack by getting that mucky blood with this pH that's off going through the heart. So that's one of the reasons we don't do that. So we just keep this warm. We want to keep the heart warm, okay, right here. You can do rescue breathing to people because that'll put a little bit of warmth into the hypothalamus and into the brain and into the heart. They'll keep that warm, but we don't bother with the extremities once they're kind of in that hypo wrap, or that where their level of consciousness, they can't talk to you and tell you who they are. They can't tell you where they are. They can't give you any information. I can put just a cold person in a hypo wrap, and that's fine. It can be used for anybody along that continuum. It's just a way to get people warm really quickly. They used to say back in the day to get into the wrap with them, or get into a sleeping bag with them. You can do that. They used to tell you to take your clothes off, but they don't do that anymore for two reasons. One, it's pretty creepy, but the other reason is that if I were to get into a sleeping bag with someone who was hypothermic and neither of us had clothes on, they would draw my heat out, and you could have two hypothermic people. So that doesn't happen anymore. Okay.
Nancy?
Wrap them up with their clothes. Yep.
We have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I would love to see what you have in your first aid kit.
Okay.
That's winter specific.
All right, let's see what I got. See, well, I guess I have to bring things over. So it's more of my emergency kit. So these are the things
your emergency kit.
Other than the usuals like extra hats and gloves and clothes like that, I usually carry this. I lost the bag for it, so I have to pull it out. This is made by Survive Outside Longer. It is an emergency bivvy, except for this one is breathable. It's not like the really inexpensive ones. And it zips up. It works actually really well. I've spent the night in this with just a liner. So it's got the silver that reflects the heat back to you. Okay. And this is from SOL. Has anybody seen these before? These are great. They used to be $25, but I think they're around $50 now, but they're definitely worth it. They pack up like really small and they weigh nothing. So that is in there. A lightweight liner. This is a silk sleeping bag liner. And in a sleeping bag, it makes your sleeping bag about 10 to 15 degrees warmer. But if I put this, which doesn't weigh a lot, inside here, I can keep somebody really, really, really warm. So this comes with me, okay? The other things I don't carry both these, I carry one or the other. I love this, and I love to show, I hope. This is this wonderful little tarp that I got. I got it years ago. But the thing that's really cool about this, if I can show you this, is it has a hood. So if I'm cold, I can actually put this hood on somebody just like this. And then it's got a place for your hands, right? So your hands are right here. So I can put my hands in there and I can wrap somebody up really easily in this. And it's got this reflective material in it. And it's very small. It's not like a big, huge. It's who
makes that?
You know, that's a really good question. I used to have a account with Liberty Mountain Sports, and I don't anymore because I don't have a wholesale account with them, but I got it from them, and I don't know the brand. It doesn't have a brand name on it, but if you can actually look around Liberty Mountain Sports catalog, you just can't order from them.
Okay.
Unless you have a wholesale account with you. But these are really cool. I really like these. And I actually went and bought them for a lot of people because I think they're really light. They're not like those blue tarps that are just really big and bulky, but I think they're more functional with the hood in the hands. And sometimes I carry this. This is made by Outdoor Research. If it's a day hike and I don't want to carry a tent, this is just kind of like an emergency shelter. So, and it's bright orange, okay? And it's kind of like a tent tarp, except where you don't have poles with it. And it doesn't have a floor, but it has material that folds under, okay? It's just called like an emergency bivvy, but what it is I can take this top part and tie it to a tree and it makes like a triangle, and I can fit a whole bunch of people in there. If I don't have a tree, I can just we can just get in it and wrap it around ourselves, and you get really, really hot. I've done this with people in a WUFA class. I've said, let's just all climb in here and put it around us. So if you all had to stay warm and get out of the elements or something, you could do that really quickly. And it does have a piece, like I said, that folds under for the floor. But this is made by Outdoor Research. And I like that it's bright orange, because if I was in a situation where I needed someone to find me, they could find me. Now this is an older one. So this is about at least 10 or 12 years old. So, but they still make this kind of thing.
What size pack are you carrying? Like, how many liters is your pack for a day?
I think 30 to 35. Right now I shove everything in my 30. I can jam the heck out of this 30-liter pack. Okay. The one I do have a 50. And if I have a really large group and I'm carrying like a lot of extra food, I might carry the 50 if I carry more clothes. But this 30 is I actually like a lot. I've been trying to find the right size because when I worked at the college, I always had to carry so much more stuff than I do now. So it's kind of trying to figure out. The other things I don't leave home without are my thermos. In the winter, obviously, ice cleats. If I'm going in the big mountains, I carry a mountain axe just because I have had to use these in really funny little situations. And always a piece of an insulate pad. I can sit on this, right, to break that conductive barrier. I can also use it as an emergency sling if I need to sling somebody's arms, right? But these are great. It's cold, it's winter, it weighs nothing. I can stick it under my butt and I can sit in the snow. I don't want to sit on my pack necessarily.
I just want to take you on all of my adventures.
I'll come with you. I carry 25 feet of parachute cord. I can write all this down and send you a list if you want.
That'd be great.
A compass and know how to use it. That's the key. Lots of high carb snacks, things that are quick burn energy, and some protein in there. We didn't even get to the nutrition. An emergency blanket, these cheap ones. A garbage bag, but this garbage bag can actually be used as an emergency shelter. It can be used as a rain jacket in a pinch. Okay, if I needed to do a hypo wrap and I didn't have a tarp, I could actually put somebody in it and have their head sticking out of it if I wanted to. The carpenter's bags are great because they're bigger. What else do I have in here? I have my emergency fire kit, little fire starters. But what I do carry lighters, but they're kind of useless when it's cold outside. So I carry waterproof matches. But I also have one of these really little, and you can make fire starters out of all kinds of things. But I just happen to get a bunch of these at Rennie's, and they're just these little teeny candles. So I keep one of these just in case it's really, really wet, because I can put this under wet stuff. This will at least give me a few minutes. And I carry a flint and steel. Dryer lint, this is going to be taken out because what I notice about dryer lint, and if you don't have synthetic clothing, you won't have this problem, but there's a lot of plastic in here. So sometimes it melts because I have a lot of synthetic clothing. It's made me really think about my clothing, right? And getting into those natural fibers. Like you were saying, Stevie, was it you were saying something about the bamboo and wanting to get into natural fibers? Yeah, I'm totally about checking that out. But a good fire starter.
I definitely carry birch bark. Or at least I did for quite a while. It's just I had birch bark in a bag. Yes,
that's great.
Crossing like state line firewood, but somebody gave me some birch bark in Georgia, and I like used it, refilled it as I like got all the way up. Don't tell anyone. Ugh.
It's bad. As long as you take it off the trees, you're golden. Duct tape, right? They can go anywhere. Hot hands, they can go anywhere. These are my two favorites: zip ties. Don't leave home without zip ties. You can fix anything. As a matter of fact, that backpack, I just broke the belt and it's zip tied together. A little knife. Gloves, in case I need to, someone's bleeding. An extra whistle. That's all I have in that one.
So Nancy, you'd be willing to type that all out and I can
I actually already have this typed out, so I can just send it to you. And I have it in a Google Doc. I can just share the Google Doc with you.
That'd be great.
Is that good?
Yeah.
And then for the first aid kit, this is a minimal one. I don't really carry a big first aid kit. I carry more of an ouch kit, and then we only have a few minutes, but I carry nothing less than a 3-inch wrap. I think anything smaller than that, you can cut off circulation. A couple cravats, triangular bandages. Blister care, I have moleskin in here, and I have these blister care bandages in here. They're in here somewhere, I'll pull those out. I have some big gauze pads and a bunch of little Band-Aids. Those are the a Write in the Rain and a pen, so I can write everything down. Another emergency blanket. Oh yeah, these are these little blister cushion things. I've never used them, but I wanted to try them, so I got them. More gloves. Oh, and just an antibiotic ointment. Roller gauze. Tape. Oh, what's in here? Toenail clippers and tweezers. I think that's it. That's all that's in my ouch kit. It's not as big as the other one.
That's really helpful though, Nancy. Does anyone have any questions to ask of Nancy before we hang up? This is the time to ask someone who has a lot of experience in the field.
And we didn't even get into nutrition. That's another whole thing.
I know. Well,
thank you for being patient with me. This is a really new format for me to talk about stuff on.
You did great. You did great.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, it was really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Questions might come out later. We can always.
You can always send me an email. Yeah.
Send me an email, or we can field them too. So.
Yeah, exactly. And Jillian, I'll send you the copies of the list with the what I have. And if you want to share that video, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.